Good morning. Welcome to Cedars Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Penny Brewer, and I am the worship associate today for our virtual service alongside our minister, Zachary Vinson. Before we start, let's pause to acknowledge that members of our congregation occupy the ancestral, traditional, and contemporary lands of the Coast Salish tribes, the homelands of the Suquamish, the Duwamish, the Chimacum, and the Sklallam. The people were ceded under duress through the Point Elliott and Point No Point treaties. We are grateful guests on these lands and affirm Indigenous sovereignty both past and present. This acknowledgement does not substitute for the need to build authentic relationships with modern-day members of these tribes and to learn about their living culture and history. And many of us are continuing to do that. Our faith community is sustained by the generosity of our members. Your contribution will nourish the spiritual growth of our community through weekly worship and ongoing programs that cultivate connection, belonging, sharing, and caring. Included in the video description and displayed on the screen is information to make a contribution to Cedars through our PayPal account. Please take time, either now or later in the service, to make a contribution to help sustain Cedars. Your gifts are greatly appreciated. Cedars is committed to being a welcoming and inclusive community in all the beauty, cultures of language, cultures, and skin tones that come together in your uniqueness. We welcome you. In all the ways you experience and express gender, in the beauty of who and how you love, we welcome you. With all the religious and ethical traditions that inform your spiritual life, we welcome you. Whether you come feeling whole, feeling broken, or anywhere in between, we welcome you. No matter how long you've been away or how soon you will return, we welcome you. You are invited to join us today and always with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. We welcome you today and always. I came to Cedars pretty late in life, after many years of searching and exploring. I had tried another UU church in Seattle, but found it to be too cerebral with not enough spirit. My first activity was to join the choir. I hadn't sung since high school, except for embarrassing my children, which I did a lot. The choir was a group for singing beautiful songs, and it was a group full of laughter and fun. The services were full of intellectual stimulation and spiritual growth. Individuals had reached out to me for a meal or coffee, and it quickly became clear that I had found my spiritual home. I joined a monthly covenant group that taught me a profound way to communicate deeply. I helped with set-up teams. I joined the social action and social justice group and marched with Martin Luther King marches, supported super suppers and family service projects, supporting refugees in the detention center, holding talks about race, about climate change. We had no minister for 7 months, and a team of us were able to create services with our congregation that were lively, creative, and informative. A sense of caring permeated the congregation, helping each other in tough times. I even had a member friend come and make my bed when I broke my arm. Now that was really something. Then the pandemic hit. The political life of our nation was already so intense and weird. Then fear, isolation, uncertainty, loneliness, loss, worry about our families, our friends, our jobs, the whole world shutting down. Then came the civil rights protest all over the world, and all the violence and inequities of our nation came into full view, and the intense feeling of helplessness to know how to make the important changes quickly. All of us feeling such a sense of overwhelm. It was also a time when we saw our earth and animals taking a break, feeling some liberation. And we saw how much difference it can make when people slow down and give earth a chance. Such a time of reflection, reconsidering our lives, and also such gratitude for all of nature that surrounds us. The question was, how do we all stay connected and involved? And technology has been our gift. And our church has made such good use of technology to help keep us feeling connected and involved. The services are now available online at any time. And this is all pretty amazing considering Zachary and Chris knew nothing about technology. But we've had wonderful people like Rhonda and others helping get us up to speed. We continue to meet by Zoom for meetings, book discussions, meditation, movie groups, morning reflection groups. My covenant group decided to meet weekly instead of monthly because we needed that connection and emotional support from each other. The choir continues to meet and sing while muted and chat. We connect by phone, by cards, by text, by FaceTime. We continue to muddle through finding ways to be there for each other. I so look forward to our summer family picnic at Fay Bainbridge Park with great food, music, games, all of us preparing for a year together helping our planet, our community, and each other. I dedicate the lighting of the chalice to the love and caring of our community. Thank you.
Before we kindle the flame of our chalice today, I wanted to take a moment to talk about a decision that members of the board, the worship associates, and myself have reached regarding the words that we use each week to light our chalice. As some of you may remember, about 2 years ago when Reverend Thomas was here, it was brought up that the use of the language brothers and sisters in our chalice lighting can be a little bit limiting and off-putting to people who don't identify on the gender binary. Since that conversation 2 years ago, the topic has continued to come up periodically here at Cedars, and recently in the conversations around belonging, several members expressed how members of their own family felt that the use of the language of brothers and sisters really wasn't welcoming to them and how they express their gender. And so after hearing that feedback and taking it to heart and talking with many members of this church, the board, and the worship associates, we made the decision that it's probably past time for us to make the change to something that is more gender neutral. In the last worship associate meeting, we discussed some of our options and reached the decision that instead of using the language of brothers and sisters, that we would just change to using the language of one family. And so from now forward, we're asking people to join us in creating this environment of belonging, of helping to welcome people no matter what their gender expression may be. And for that spirit of belonging to be part of what we are calling upon, what we are inviting into the space each week when we kindle our chalice. And so with that, I want to invite you all to join me in kindling the flame of our chalice today using our new gender-neutral one family affirmation. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because we are one family, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be. Come, let us worship together.
Shall we gather at the river, where bright angel feet have trod, with its crystal tide forever, flowing by the throne of God? Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful, beautiful river, gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. On the margin of the river, washing up the silver spray, we will walk and worship together all the happy golden day. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river, gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. Ere we reach the shining river, may we ever burden down. Grace our spirits will deliver and provide a robe and crown. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river, gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. Soon we'll reach the shining river, soon our pilgrimage will cease, soon our happy hearts will quiver with the melody of peace. Yes, we'll gather at the river, the beautiful river, gather with the saints at the river that flows by the throne of God. We worship with open hearts, nurture a learning spirit, serve justice with compassion, and love without judgment. We worship with open hearts, nurture a learning spirit, serve justice with compassion, and love without judgment.
Hello. I'm going to tell you a story today based on a classic children's nursery song called The Bear Hunt. Maybe you know it, but maybe this one will be just a little bit different. So, in my story, there's a community, and every year this community goes on a bear hunt. No one can quite remember why they go on a bear hunt, but it's tradition. So every year the community gathers everyone up and they set off to hunt bears. This year is no different. So the community, everybody gets their backpack And in their backpack, they put a headlamp and some rope, and they put some binoculars, and they put a gigantic picnic lunch, and of course, a lot of water. And they put on their backpacks, and everyone in the community sets off down the road. Now this year is a little bit different because there has been so much rain this year. And so the community's not quite sure what it's going to look like when they go out. And so they walk and they walk down the path and they come to a field. And normally this field has flowers and grasses that basically reach most people's knees. And this year they get to the field and the grass is over the head of even the tallest person in the community. And they think, uh-oh, what are we going to do? And they look left and they look right, and the field stretches as far as anyone can see. And they say, well, we can't go over it. We can't go under it. We can't go around it. We're gonna have to go through it. And so they take on their handy dandy backpacks and they get out the rope and they make sure that everyone is holding onto the rope so that everyone in the community will be safe and no one will get lost in the tall grass. And they set out through the grass. Swish, swash, swish, swash, swish, swash, swish, swash. Whew. That was exhausting. They get through the grass and they're panting a little bit, and they look over and they see some people having a picnic on the other side of the grass. And they say to the people, hey, we're going on a bear hunt. Do you want to come with us? It's so much fun. And the people who are having a picnic say, yeah, that would be great. Thank you for inviting us. And so they gather up their picnic's remains and they join the group. And they keep walking and they walk and they walk and they walk some more until they get to the woods. And normally, this is a really pleasant part, some shade, a nice cooling time in the walk. But this year, because of the rain, the woods is more like a forest. It's dark and overgrown, and they can barely see through it, and people are nervous, and they look left and they look right, and they can't see a way around it. And they say, well, we can't go over it, and we can't go under it, and we can't go around it. We're gonna have to go through it. And so they get out their handy dandy backpacks and they put on their headlamps and they grab the rope and they make sure everybody is safe and they set off through the forest. Stumble, trip, stumble, trip, stumble, trip, stumble, trip. Whew. So tired. They're so tired at this point that they think this is the perfect place for a picnic. And even the people who had had a picnic before, they're ready to eat again. So they set it all out and they have a lovely picnic lunch with lots and lots of water because everyone needs to stay hydrated on a bear hunt. And there's some more people there and they explain that they're going on a bear hunt. Would they like to join? And the people say, that sounds like so much fun. And so they sit down and have a little bit of food with them. And then everybody cleans up and they continue on their way to hunt for bears. And they walk and they walk and they walk some more. And you know what they find? They find an enormous field of deep, squishy, dark mud. And they look to the left and they look to the right. And the mud field goes on as far as the eye can see. And what do they say? They say, well, we can't go over it, and we can't go under it, and we can't go around it. We're gonna have to go through it. And so everybody sits down and they take off their sneakers and they tie their shoes around their neck and they roll up their pants and they begin the walk through the dark, squishy mud. Squish, squash, squish, squash, squish, squash, squish, squash. Whew. They get to the other side and everyone's legs are covered in mud and people have some mud on their faces and some mud on their hands and some mud on their arms. Everyone is pretty darn dirty. And at this point, the youngest person in the community stops everyone and says, what? Why are we going on a bear hunt? I don't get it. Why would we want to hunt bears? That doesn't seem very nice. It doesn't seem very much in keeping with how we are as a community. Why would we want to hunt down bears? An older person looks at the young kid and says, "You know what? That's an excellent question. I think this must be your very first bear hunt." The kid says, "It is. It is. I've been so excited. I've never been old enough to go." And the older person says, "I have a little secret for you. We never, ever, ever find any bears on the bear hunt. The bear hunt is about the journey. It's about going through things together. It's not about what we find at the end." And that's my story.
I believe that when life throws us challenges, that there is great power in being reminded of the connection that we share. That through the tumult and all of the chaos of life, we have each other through joy and sorrow. And I want to invite us to take a moment to reflect on this connection, on the mutual support that we offer to each other. In a moment, I'll invite us into a moment of silence, to center ourselves, to take some breaths. And after the moment of silence, I want to invite all of you to share a prayer of litany with me. A litany is a type of prayer in which I will offer a call, and all of you at home will offer a response. The response for this litany is, "I am with you in this. I am with you in this." And so after a moment of silence, of reflection and centering, I will start the call. And when I say, you will respond, "I am with you in this." You'll pick it up as we go along. I feel confident. But first, let's take some deep breaths. Breathing in and out. Sensing the space that we're in. Sensing the feelings in our bodies. Let ourselves sink into this moment, breathing together in this silence. Please open your hearts and join me in the spirit of prayer. Above, a sea of hands holding candles lit in the air. Someone holds a sign with a rainbow heart. One human family. To the refugee family seeking a safe place for their children's dreams, we say, "I am with you in this." To the Black parents, wondering when will the lives of their children truly matter, say, "I am with you in this." To the lonely, the frightened, the dispossessed, say, "I am with you in this." To the bullied, the battered, the broken down, say, I am with you in this. To the hungry and the homeless, to the silenced and the shamed, to the weary and the worried, say, I am with you in this. To all of those for whom your disheveled heart is aching, say, I am with you in this. 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 Amen. I have a memory of a science project that I did when I was in probably about first grade. It's a project that many of you have probably seen pulled off at some point in your own life. First, you take a bottle or a jar, something with a lid on it that can be sealed. Then you gather up all sorts of different liquids, corn syrup, water, vegetable oil, and rubbing alcohol, for example. To each of these liquids, you add a few drops of food coloring to dye each one its distinct color: yellow, red, green, blue, so on, whatever colors you have. Then, once the liquids have been dyed with the food coloring, you pour them into a jar individually, starting with the corn syrup, layering each one on top of the next. And because each of these substances is of a different density, distinctly colored layers begin to form. Once all the colored liquids have been added to the container, the lid is placed on it and it's sealed. The end product looks a little bit like a multicolored, oddly formed Jell-O mold sealed in a jar. However, since all the ingredients in the container are liquid, when you turn the container upside down, the denser liquid starts to sink down to the new bottom, and the lighter ones make their way up to the new top, and the layers flip. It's a bit like watching the bubbles of wax in a lava lamp rise and fall. But in this case, eventually, everything settles back into nice, neat layers. That is, unless you shake the container up. In fact, when we were doing this project when I was in about first grade, we were told distinctly, don't shake the container up. The explanation was given that the layers didn't belong together. That's why they settled in their own place. Shaking the jar up would disturb the balance and force some of those liquids to combine, and as a result, ruin the multicolored effect we had created. Of course, as a first grader, that meant I had to see this for myself. So, I took my jar, and as soon as I was on the bus on my way home and out of sight of my teacher, I shook it. The thing I found when I shook the container was not that the project got ruined necessarily. Sure, the neat multicolored layers got disturbed after shaking it, and they didn't resettle in the same uniform pattern. But the result was just as interesting to me as the multicolored layers had been in the first place. After shaking the container, some of the colored liquids began to merge with each other, while others, maintaining their membrane of surface tension, continued to be distinct. Some of the colors combined to become other colors, as the alcohol and water, for instance, came together. The end result was not layers of color stacked on top of each other, but thousands of little colored bubbles mixed together. If it weren't for the still fluid nature of the contents, it could easily be confused for a jar of some sort of opaque beads or other unknown craft supplies instead of a mix of distinct liquids. This last year has reminded me a bit like shaking that container on the bus ride home. In many ways, it feels like we have literally been shaken up. The nice, neat patterns and ways of doing things that we had previously established are now a jumble, mixed together or unrecognizable. And with this has come a degree of sadness. I mentioned a few weeks ago that March 1st, 2020, a little over a year ago, was our last Sunday together in person at the Island School. And March 8th, 2020 was our first virtual service together. That Sunday, members of Cedars and the Kitsap Fellowship joined Reverend Jessica Starr Rockers and myself for the first time on YouTube. We never thought we would be doing this for a year. 2, 3, 6 months tops. But a year? A year? And there's still more time that needs to pass before we are able to meet together again. We hope possibly that we might be able to make that transition back to in-person services and activities in October. But that date still feels tentative. It all depends on where things are at with COVID-19 and what public health officials are saying as October 2021 approaches. We'll know more as the date draws near. I'm not going to lie, this last year has been hard, really hard. Hard on all of you, hard on me, hard on us collectively as a community. Many times over the past year, I found myself wondering, can I keep this up? Can we keep this up? Not gonna lie, I've cried a lot. I've been scared, been confused, and felt very alone a lot of times. And I know that many of you have too. As we've talked to each other in Zoom meetings or over the phone, sending emails back and forth, I hear many of these same emotional responses that I've experienced echoed in your own experiences. This past year, though, it hasn't all been bad. It's been hard, but there's good in there too. Often in the hard moments, in those moments when I felt myself wondering, can I keep this up? One of you, without fully even knowing or understanding what I was going through personally, would reach out and offer a word of support, appreciation, or encouragement. You may not have known this at the time, but doing this, offering these words of support and encouragement, helped remind me of the importance of what we have to offer each other and the world. And the truth is that these words of encouragement, these words of support, have helped me to realize that we are, in fact, better together than alone. I found that when you supported and encouraged me, I was somehow better positioned to offer support and encouragement back to you. This sort of relationship is what some philosophers like to call a reflexive relationship, or a relationship that has a circular pattern of cause and effect. In a sense, these sort of relationships posit that the more that we show up and support each other, the more that we are able to show up and support each other. That through sharing such a dynamic, we create a feedback loop that perpetuates the support and encouragement that I'm talking about. Has it been all perfect? No. But have we continued to show up and try? Yes. We've shown up in new ways. We've learned new skills together. And we've continued to offer small but powerful tokens of support to one another. And as we continue to navigate through this time and prepare to transition out to the other side. We need not only to keep this sort of feedback loop up, but to work to foster more of it. We need to continue supporting each other and this community in all the ways that we can. It's not been easy going through this. It's been hard. I said that. And yet, here we are together still. Despite all the nice, neat things we did before, those layers of organization and order being shaken up, we've remained together in this container that we call Cedars. When I think of where we are now, that image of the shaken up jar full of mingled bubbles of oil, corn syrup, water, and rubbing alcohol comes to mind. And I recognize that things may never settle back into the nice, neat layers that we knew before. Our world has been irreversibly altered. There's no going back to the way it was before. And now we are faced with the decision of resisting the change or embracing it. And I, for one, really hope that we can embrace it. It would feel like a shame to go back to exactly how things were before this. We have learned and grown so much together. And I hope that we can carry those lessons, those learnings, that growth with us as we move into this next chapter, whatever it looks like. To use this, to use all of the learnings to help to continue to innovate and create together. To bring these lessons, our talents, our time, our treasures together, to innovate and continue building the beloved community we hope for, and to do our part to bend the arc of the universe towards justice. I'll be honest, it's hard to fully want to embrace change all the time. And especially right now, it can be easy for us to think back to how things were pre-COVID and project a little bit of idealism. Thinking back, our imaginations, or at least my imagination, I've noticed tends to paint the grass green with nostalgia. A shade of green that seems perhaps more vivid and lifelike than the grass of the field that we're in right now. And while there are many things I prefer about the time before all of this, I do think that it's important that we not idealize things in a way that causes us to forget the reality of the situation as it was. The reality is, things were not perfect in the before times. In our recent conversations around belonging, we have heard many reflections about what it is that first caused people to feel like they belong to this community. These reflections have helped highlight the many subtle ways that Cedars helps foster a sense of meaning and connection in people's lives, providing support to each other in times of transition or emotional turmoil, allowing people to grow new abilities, understandings, talent together, allowing people new opportunities to grow in their understanding of what it means to be a person of faith or to have spiritual practices, providing meaningful opportunities of service to engage with the world, and connecting with others around a set of shared values. These have all been named as factors that contributed to people's sense of belonging to this community. And these are all amazing, wonderful things. But we also need to remember what people have shared about their experiences or the barriers that have prevented them from feeling that sense of belonging. We need to remember the families of children and youth in our community who have expressed a feeling of unsupport or disconnection from the church. We need to remember the members who have expressed feelings of being excluded for not living on Bainbridge Island, for being geographically isolated. And still, we need to at least consider that for each of these barriers that have been shared, the people who were willing to share these hard truths with us, that there are just as many stories that were not shared. Stories that prevented people from connecting into this community in a meaningful way. Stories of people who came through our doors or to a virtual service maybe once, twice, and never again. We may never know, we may never know the fullness of these stories, but can trust that such tales exist. These are hard to hear situations, and all of them are true, and were true before COVID. Unless we decide to hear those stories, hear the feedback that is being offered, and to take it in, and upon reflecting on it, commit ourselves to some sort of meaningful action, some new way forward to address these barriers, they're going to continue. And it's for this very reason that I really want to encourage us to take a moment, to take this moment that we find ourselves in as a community and try to see the opportunity that is present in this time. The layers of organization and order that we knew have been shaken up. That in conjunction with all the new learning we have undergone and the feedback that people have given us about the barriers to belonging, all of this together presents us with the opportunity to try something new, to think about the possibilities of what can be, rather than simply trying to recreate what we knew before. For example, to give you a bit of an idea of the sort of new ways of doing things that I'm talking about. When it's safe to, again, gather in person and we feel confident to hold large events with food together, we're planning to hold the all-church retreat that got canceled last March. We want to revive those efforts, to take that plan and to bring it into where we find ourselves on the other side of this. This time last year, there was so much excitement about this event. The registration response was phenomenal. Almost half of the members of the congregation, including many of our families with children and youth, registered in some capacity, whether that was for the overnight or just for the daytime programming. That sort of participation in a congregation is frankly phenomenal. And I think it speaks to the fact that we were on to something, trying to hold this all-church retreat, inviting people of all ages to experience spiritual programming and community together. Among those who registered in our community with families, members stepped up and they contributed to offset the cost of children and youth to participate in this event. And hearing the feedback that has been offered about families feeling unsupported and knowing that we want to attempt this event again, we've begun thinking about immediate and tangible ways to express support for our families. Out of these conversations, we began planning what it is that we can do to support these families. And one thing that came to mind was to remove all barriers for families to participate in this retreat. And so in our budget this year, we've put a number in the retreat line item that is really a number that we're hoping will cover the projected costs of all children and youth who register for the retreat, to remove all of the financial obstacles and invite people in a way that lets them know we value them, that lets them know that we value them so much that we are willing to put our money behind our programming and support their needs in the church. We need to continue supporting each other, supporting our families, helping to remove those barriers so that we can be together in a community that is full of possibility, that's full of the presence of young people, that's full of relationships that bridge the gap between generations. Another area we know we will need to innovate in when we return to in-person is using technology to close the geographic space between us. This includes exploring how to hold meetings and worship services that have both an in-person and virtual component. This is going to require more learning, and somewhere along the way is also going to require spending some money. The technology, the tools that we will need to make this happen will cost us. How much at this point, to be honest, is really uncertain. But we do know that continuing such a presence is going to be an important part of what comes next for this congregation. The decision also represents a new way to bridge the gap between those who feel a barrier to belonging at Cedars due to where they live, to create a church where it no longer matters if you live in Kitsap County or Oregon or Florida or are all the way on the other side of the world. You are still afforded a meaningful chance to connect to this community, to connect with a people with shared values and vision, and to find a source of meaning in your life no matter where you are. As long as you have an internet connection, you can come to church. And it's not just the barriers, though, these barriers to belonging that are informing where we are hoping to move next after it's safe to return. One of the powerful things that we've heard from people in our conversation about belonging is the way in which service projects have served an important role in helping connect people and form meaningful relationships in a way that allows people to integrate into our community and belong to our community. Since receiving this feedback about the importance of these projects in fostering that sense of belonging, members of the board, the Social Action Committee, Catherine J. and myself have been in conversation with other nonprofits, seeking out opportunities for us to partner and develop relationships and avenues towards such service projects. Where this conversation has led us recently is to exploring a partnership with the West Sound Wildlife Shelter on Bainbridge. In April, we're planning to do a day of service that invites members of the community to partner together and to help this organization in their mission. For us to build relationships with each other, to be useful in the world, and to also build a relationship with another organization. We recognize that it's often in doing that relationships are deepened. And so we want to create more of these opportunities. Our goal in this area is to grow the total percentage of our time and resources that we spend as a community doing or addressing our social justice programming and our mission statement to serve justice with compassion and to love without judgment. And beyond all these sort of new and revived and innovative plans that we're hoping to be able to pull off in the next church year, we still need to continue to do many of the things that we already do together. We still need to pay our light bills, to pay for our staff, to continue to meet for worship and fellowship, to gather to share meals, to find opportunities to learn and grow even more together. But for any of these things to happen, we need your help. For these things to happen, we must make sure that we fund the budget. As the budget leadership team and the stewardship committee have begun looking ahead, we're projecting our expenses for the 2021-2022 church year at around $229,000. And even with all the thought that has gone into making this projection, we're still uncertain about many of the costs that we may face when we return. There's too many variables to know for sure, which is why having the funds available is going to be important. So I once heard a fundraising pitch at an event I was participating at in Oakland, California. The fundraiser was a fashion show that was raising money for an arts collective in Oakland that worked with disabled people, helping them to cultivate avenues for self-expression and developing opportunities to monetize their art to support themselves. It's a very cool organization, actually. But when the moment for the ask finally came, the MC got up on stage with the microphone and looked out over the crowd and implored the people gathered in the room to give until it hurts. And the thing is, that's not what we're asking all of you to do this year, or hopefully any year. We're not asking you to give until it hurts. What we are asking all of you to do is to make a financial contribution to Cedars that helps us make all of these things possible. We're not asking any one person to shoulder all of the weight and fund our budget alone, but instead, we're asking people to be generous according to their means, to share the financial burden between all of us, so that no one person is carrying so much that it hurts. That's not our goal. We are a community. That means we share responsibilities and burdens. This is our community. And together, that means that it is our responsibility to support it. Support comes in many ways. But without the financial support provided by all of you, many of these plans will fall by the wayside or become harder to make happen because the funds aren't there for the supplies, the resources, the tools that we need. And so I ask all of you, let's give each other a break and make things just a little bit easier by funding our budget. It's so much easier to accomplish hard things and chase after dreams when there's money in the bank. When you know that a problem, when it comes up, can be solved, that we can get the things that we need to continue forward. And as I said earlier, this last year, it has been really hard. And through it all, your contributions, your gifts of time, talent, and treasure really made everything we've done possible. I believe that if we continue to support this church financially, if we grow our financial contributions, that these things that we want to do will be all the more possible. And that we will be able to face them with all the more grace and support and gratitude for each other. These are all things I think we'll need. Because as I said, whatever comes next for us is unknown. But unlike at the start of all of this COVID mess, this time we know that change is sitting on the horizon, and that if we lean into each other, we will come through this okay. Because deep down, despite all the challenges we have faced, I think it's pretty clear that we are indeed better together. To the glory of life. Please join me in extinguishing the flame of our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Our service this day has ended, but our service to one another and the world begins anew. May we be inspired to live into our commitment to one another and the truth that we are indeed better together.